So, welcome back to another Bearfoot Miniatures guides to the book of the Outlands, or the Ash Waste coverage in general, I suppose. So today I'm going to be going over the Ash Waste Nomads, as well as the generic hanger-on that is the Beast Tamer in the book that's available to any gang, including the Ash Waste Nomads. And I'm going to be doing that because it's like the last bit of the book that I've not yet covered. So with that, we'll get into the Ash Waste Nomads, which are a faction that's been brought back from the, I was going to say back from the dead, back from the back shelf, I suppose. And they've now moved away from vehicles and moved into this Fremen-style faction that is inhabiting the Wastelands of Necromunda. There's rumours that they are the Iron Lords fled to the desert to mount a guerrilla war. That is one possibility. Another possibility is that they are slaves of the Iron Lords that have just continued their resistance to the masters of Necromunda. The Iron Lords, in fact, because I've never explained this, I only learned it recently, are the original rulers of Necromunda before the Imperial Fists came and sanctioned the planet for the Imperium. Now, with that sort of little bit of background, the Ash Waste Nomads are always an outlaw gang. So that means in your Law and Misrule campaign, they're going to be on the outlaw side. In Uprising campaign, they're going to be on the Ruination side. You can play these guys in anything but the Outlands campaign, but unless you're in that Ash Wastes, they do get negatives that I believe are really built into their profile. So what have they actually got in general? Now, in general, they're cooler than average gangs. They are on the sticking around side rather than the running away side. They've got sky mantles and ash cloaks built into them. So the basic ganger is slightly more expensive than you would expect. I believe it's 65 credits, but we'll get there. The sky mantle allows them to do a double action hide, or hide in the wastes, which means they operate as if they were under pitch black, so they can't be targeted more than 3 inches away. So you can hide potentially a heavy weapons, or even someone that you want to charge with the next turn. And they set up this bubble, or charge distance, or bubble of weapon, that your opponent really doesn't want to enter, which is a really cool tactic, I think. And that's on all of their warriors except for the Dustback Helamite Riders, which is 2 types. They've then got the Ash Cloak, which is a respirator, which sort of confuses me of why the respirators are also in the list, but yeah, it counts as a respirator, and also gives a 5-up save against battlefield conditions from the wastes, which is really useful. And then they have the Wasteland Skills, which are really, really good. I'd say 4 out of 6 of them, maybe 5 out of 6 are really good. I'd even roll randomly on this table. There's only Ferocity, Wasteland, and potentially the Escher table that I would roll randomly on. But this one is definitely one of them because so many of them are useful. Finally, in the positives column, we've got the gain suspensors from when I did my original coverage of Ash Waste Nomads, like from the battle reports that you can see on the channel. They actually gained suspensors, which would have been a really big help in the game that I was playing against Orlocks, because those suspensors to allow you charge casters to move and fire, or even stand up and fire, really make it so that you can deal at least modestly with vehicles. So the downsides of the gang, that's one of them. They've got no vehicles, and their charge caster is strength 6. I believe you do need charge casters. I think they're really good, but that's their best thing for dealing with vehicles from the outset. In skirmishes at the start of a campaign, that's your vehicle, or your anti-vehicle weapon. The other downside is no grenades, and I actually didn't notice this as well. I noticed it when I was watching the Wellywood Wargaming rundown of Ash Waste Nomads. I do think actually it's worth checking out. If you like Ash Waste Nomads, check out Wellywoods, check out Commander Cheapskates. They're all useful. I had my own opinions on the gang already. It does slightly differ, it does differ from theirs, But they are really cool channels that I watch, I would recommend to watch. And yeah, didn't notice there was no grenades until Wellywood pointed it out. So that's really the expense of them. Another downside, obviously balanced out by stats. I think they're on the higher level of how good the gangs are, especially in the wastes. I think they do suffer in stuff like Dominion campaigns. They've also got the as a downside, not really to the Ash Waste player. In Dominion campaigns, we're not going to get really far into Dominion campaigns, they actually ruin territories and create old ruins. So you have this effect where when they win a scenario and would take a territory from someone else, they get 4d6 times 10 credits and ruin the territory, creating old ruins. So that could actually mean if they win a game against everyone, or again, multiple games against everyone, those players keep the old ruins, but all the territories are just rubbish from now on, which I like the idea of that. The effect I'm dubious of, just because it could ruin campaigns for people. But then again, if you have some sort of horrendous territory, like Needleways, maybe it's a massive bonus. So with that, we'll get on to the actual profiles. So we've got Leader, he's got movement 6, which is very fast. He's got initiative 3+, and 3+ is repeated throughout all of the gang. So he's actually a good initiative, 66% chance of passing. Weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 4, so he's a combat champion, or a combat leader. Strength toughness 3, 2 wounds, 2 attacks. Leadership 5, cool 5, willpower 6, intelligence 6. So he's standard cool for a leader, really. On the good side of general stats, not as cool as a Goliath, though. So with that, he's got gang leader, gang hierarchy, tools of the trade, group activation, and access to skills, as we would expect. Who didn't see those special rules coming with the leader? So I'm sorry for wasting your time by saying it. Skill access, he's got agility secondary, combat secondary, and wasteland secondary. Cunning, leadership, and savant primary. So, as I said before, wasteland is actually a skill set that I'd roll on randomly. It's good enough to do that. Obviously, you're picking a primary skill from the start, and they're 3 very good skill sets to have from the start. So what would I pick from those skill sets? And it's going to depend on what you arm your character with, but I'll give a quick rundown. Cunning, Overwatch is really good. Ash Waste Nomads have mass access to long rifles, so that could be really useful. Not what I'd steer away from it on this guy. Savant, Fixer is very good. I don't like the credits spiraling in a lot of campaigns, so I would steer away from Fixer, but he's a very, very good skill. I don't believe you need munition here on this guy. I think 4-up ammo rolls are good enough. They're reliable enough. With your charge casters, which I believe are a 5-up off the top of my head, you actually get a special piece of war gear called a rocket pack, which we'll go into on the champions, where I'd recommend putting a charge caster. And that mitigates the ammo rolls of the charge caster. Leadership, I think Iron Will or Mentor is where I'd go here. I don't massively like Overseer. So then, yeah, I'd go Mentor or Iron Will. Keep you guys around longer. You're going to have less gangers in your gang without setting it up specifically to be high. On average, you're going to have less gangers. So you want to stick around longer. Cunning, you also get the evade skill. Now, I know you could go infiltrate, but at the start, it's your only access to cunning on someone that's going to be starting with a skill. Do you really want your gang leader isolated? I don't think so. So you have got the evade skill, however, which is the -1 to hit from range shooting, which I believe is like it's a really good skill. I don't believe it. It is, because -1 to hit. Ooh, good. What would I arm these guys with? Well, Charge Caster, I've already said I wouldn't go on your leader. He's a combat leader. You've got close combat weapon options of Chain Lance, Long Blade, Mono Hook, Stalking Knife. The Stalking Knife is like a fighting knife with an additional -1 to AP, I believe. I don't like fighting knives, stalking knives, to be honest. It's 20 credits, which almost gets you a blast carbine. Mono hook is good, but I like the long blade. It gets +1 to hit. In engage, it's got its parry. It's got the -2 to AP. So I really like that. The mono hook is the other option at -1 AP, pulverize. So pulverize is roll against the target's toughness when you've already rolled your injury dice. If you succeed, you can change a flesh wound to a serious injury. Now with your leader's 2 attacks, he's going to have 2 close combat weapons, hopefully. Hopefully he's going to be charging with his movement 6. I would say you just want to gank someone before they do anything to you. And with enough attacks, I know it's a bit of insurance to get the pulverize, but I much prefer the +1 to hit and -2 AP over the changing of serious injury dice. So yeah, my money's on the long blade. Chain lance would be very good if you could get the mounted condition, but Ash Waste gangs are the only gangs that can't take the mounted condition with a Wasteland dirt bike on their fighters. Surely Games Workshop's going to release something to allow them to gain a mount on everyone, but for now he is on foot, and the minus to hit from the chain lance. I know he's got versatile. He's just that bit expensive. I like the long blade. You can even go long blade chain lance if you have the creds for it, and I think that would be my loadout if I had the creds. I don't like starting armor on anyone. They do have access to field armor, which is high tech. He's got a respirator even though he's already got one. Photo goggles could be useful depending on how you spec in your gang. If you're going heavy on the Stormcallers, yeah, the photo goggles are more going to be for shooting characters. Blast carbine, blast rifle, auto gun. I would always go with the blast carbine. The blast carbine has a better close range to hit modifier. It's got a rapid fire dice. If I was going on the cheaper side, I'd go scavenged auto gun rather than blast rifle. Mainly for that rapid fire dice and it being cheap. If I'm already going cheaper, I'm going to go cheap. And that's the scavenged auto gun. For ranged weapons, what would I actually choose? Now, a web pistol is really good. Web gun, really good. You could put your long rifle on this guy. If you're fighting with battlefield conditions of range visibility, the long range modifier is always used. So you'll get +1 to hit with a long rifle if he's in lowered visibility, which you can manipulate as Ash Waste Nomads. Web guns are always great. Web pistol, web gun. The only consideration you have to make of whether or not you should take a web pistol, web gun is how many you want in your gang, how many will make your group despise you. And I think that is my rundown of his long range weapons. Because long rifle, if you want a ranged weapon on this guy, uses long range modifier invisibility, as I say. And then considering how many people you want to hate you. Onto and I didn't even say his Fremen name. Katragi Chieftain. So next onto the Ash Waste Nomads Nuktari Watcher, who's 100 credits and is a ballistic skill 3, movement 5 champion, weapon skill 4, so he's the shooting champion. And as you would expect for the rest of the champions, strength 3, toughness 3, 2 wounds, initiative 3, 2 attacks, leadership 6, cool 6, will and intelligence 7. He's got the standard special rules. He has his ash cloak and ash mantle, the respirator. He's got his ash cloak and sky mantle. He's got cunning secondary, leadership secondary, savant secondary, shooting and wastelands primary. Now shooting skills are all excellent. It's on a shooting character. Web gun, hip shooting is a rage-inducing option. But I've already said, I think you need to get a charge caster on these guys. You need to start having something to take down vehicles, and your charge caster is where it's at. So, having that, charge caster, shooting, I suppose you could hip shoot with it, but every skill in shooting is brilliant. Fast shot, charge caster, very good. But what do the Wasteland skills do? Why am I raving about them so much? So the Wasteland skills, pretty much always useful if you were in the wastes, surprisingly. Now, You've got Born to the Wastes, which is you may ignore the effects of the battlefield surface. If Insecta Mechanicus, you may perform the Hiding Wastes double action. So that's really good. The hiding, I believe, is a really good tactic and skill from the Ash Mantle. Ignoring the effects of the battlefield surface is really useful. Some of those effects are really nasty. Like the surface can cause you to go insane. It can cause you to take hits. It can halve your speed. Having that ignoring of it is really, really useful in the campaign. Stormwalker. If you start on the battlefield surface, you may add 2 inch to your movement characteristic. That brings this guy to movement 7. Your leader can, if he gets it on his random roll, can go to movement 8, which is just horrendously fast. Then you've got Eyes in the Wastes. Treat visibility as being 6 inch greater than it actually is. In addition, when using pitch black rules, you can target hidden models up to 9 inches away. So any scenario where you play in the sentries, this will help because you're targeting 9 inches. If you treat invisibility as 6 inches greater, that means your Stormcallers can really bring in the waste, and you can still target people further away than your opponent can. You can stay a full movement distance by moving backwards as they move forwards while shooting, and they've got to double move to get within your range and waste a turn anyway. So a really good skill. Beast Handler. Now this is one of the lesser ones on the list, but it basically, if you've got the mounted condition, you make an additional close combat attack resolved at strength 3, AP -1, damage 2 every time you perform a fight action or reaction attack. And that's I'd say one of the worst ones on the skill list. And I'd still reckon it's worth it if you're a mounted fighter. It's a shame that only the Stormcallers and Helamite Riders can actually have the mounted condition, but hopefully that will change. As I say, it's a good skill. It's a shame it's only strength 3. If I got that on a mounted fighter, I wouldn't be complaining, and you're saving yourself XP if you roll randomly on that one. Ever Vigilant, when making reaction attacks, makes it an additional attack and doesn't suffer a penalty for turning to face their opponent. I prefer aggressive combat skills rather than defensive combat skills. I know it's making attacks, but you've already got to survive. It's not a bad skill, it's just I prefer the aggressive ones. However, if I got it rolling randomly for minus XP, I wouldn't be upset with it. Bring It Down. Now this is, for me, the best one in the list. Bring It Down allows you to do a basic action of Bring It Down, which designates a target. Then, when you have done that, I flicked away from the page. When you have done that, you can re-roll the dice to hit when performing a shoot basic action against the designated target. And that's for the remainder of the round, all friendly fighters, including this fighter. So your charge caster champion can designate a target whilst also then firing and re-rolling to hit. So that's, in fact, better than getting +1 to hit if you've got both if you've got a 3-up or a 4-up ballistic skill, that's better than getting +1 to hit. So you're better off doing that than aiming. It then also affects the rest of your gang. So if you designate a target with your charge caster, you can shoot at something different and then have all your long rifles ping off that guy or that vehicle. It's really, really useful. I could talk all day on possible situations where that skill could come in. You designate a vehicle, shoot your charge caster at it, re-roll into hit. That's better than a 2+ to hit with your 3-up ballistic skill. It's just so useful. So I would start out probably picking one. I'd pick that one for a charge caster champion 100%. I'd possibly pick it on every champion that I could, unless it's something like a hip shooting web gun, because everything else, allowing your entire gang to re-roll to hit, even if you have 2 champions doing that to 2 targets a turn, that's the other 2 members. It's providing re-rolls. If you've got 6 in your gang, all 6 will get re-rolls at those 2 targets. It's just incredible. So what can they be armed with? Blast carbine, blast rifle, scavenged auto gun, blast pistol, scavenged stub gun, web pistol, long rifle, venom caster, web gun, charge caster, heavy blaster. And this is the same as the leader, the same options. Here I would put a charge caster with dispenser, always dispenser, so that you can stand up and fire. Not even as much about moving around the map. It's mostly about standing up and firing, because you don't have access to that ferocity for Nerves of Steel or agility for Spring Up. So yeah, you need that to crack vehicles. We sort of puts the heavy blaster out. The heavy blaster is, or the charge caster is a missile launcher, which is slightly shorter range at 36. It's got shock missiles instead of frag missiles. Shock is a strength 3 blast with -1 to AP, but has shock, so a 6 to hit will automatically wound. So if you roll a 6 to hit, everything under that template is just wounded automatically. The crack missile is strength 6, both of these are -6 range over the missile launcher, but you've got no other options, and it's for cracking tanks, really, or cracking vehicles, and that's the best one. And I do believe it's a good weapon. So the heavy blaster is like a heavy stubber. Strength 4, rapid fire 2. It's got worse ammo roll at 5+, but it's got shock. So it's a better version of the heavy stubber, I believe, but it just pales in insignificance next to the absolutely necessary charge caster. If it was strength 5, I'd potentially go for it, because that means you're wounding medium vehicles on a 4 rather than a 5, but as it is at strength 4, you're wounding them on a 5+, which is just too much for me. Your long rifles, there's better places to put them because your gangers can take them. So the web gun versus the venom caster. Now this is more what I put on a secondary champion. They're obviously both very good. Both of them will go straight to injury dice. So the web gun hits, it's got to roll to wound. It's 125 credits. The venom caster hits and then rolls against the target's toughness rather than with a strength value, and is 160 credits. So it's usually easier, on a quick calculation in my head, to get that web gun to put someone down serious injured. The web gun ignores, or they both ignore, no? The web gun ignores armor. The venom caster is toxin, not gas, so won't be ignoring armor. Yeah, toxin, not gas. So it won't be ignoring armor. Which means that for 125 credits versus 160, I would say you're always better off with that web gun. It's strength 5 template, so you wounded most things, even a Goliath on 3s. Venom casters, you need a 5/6 to wound, and it allows armor saves. So like one of my favourite tactics is hip shooting, web gun. Obviously we all know this is the most rage inducing thing, and when I say favourite tactic I mean near never used, but as a theory hammer that pans out to be well, hip shooting web gun with a cheap as chips Juve following up just to stamp on people's heads and rack up into another champion very quickly. I think that is one of the most overlooked aspects of Juves, is just having a cheap body to just stamp on everyone's head. Next, we're going to go into the Witari Stormcaller for 120 credits, and this comes base on a Helamite. Movement 5, which is by the by, because he's always got to be on, is Helamite because he has Born in the Saddle rule. So he can't actually pick a card or a fighter card that doesn't have the Helamite. So he's movement 8, basically. Weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 4, strength toughness 3, wounds 2, initiative 3, 2 attacks, leadership 8, which is weird for the leader, like for a shaman of a tribe. Cool 6, willpower 6, intelligence 7. He has the change weather special rule, or the Call of the Storm special rule, which makes him able to change the weather. God, I don't know why they put that extra step in there. And he's got to have a Stormcaller staff to do this. So essentially, you're going to always take the Stormcaller staff. I'd never not take that. So unless you want access to another Savant person, that's, I suppose he's more the combat champion. He doesn't have to be young magician, I suppose. He's got access to combat secondary, cunning secondary, leadership secondary, Savant primary, Wastelands primary. So there is two ways of running this, and that's the shaman with the Stormcaller staff. And I would recommend at least your first one being that champion, because he can make the visibility, or you can change it by 6 inches. If you don't have any visibility on the table, the visibility becomes max range 24. Otherwise, increase or decrease the visibility by 6 to a minimum of 6. And it lasts for the remainder of the battle and can be modified again. This sets up loads of tactics. If your visibility is 6 and you need it to be longer, obviously you make it longer. If it's going to if you're playing a shooting gang, you make it really close in and you get in combat with them. If you're playing a combat gang, you just completely wipe out that visibility and make it so that you can see everything. There isn't ever a time, I don't think, where manipulating the battlefield conditions won't be useful. It'll always be useful. So yeah, your first one I would recommend always with that. And the Stormcaller staff is like a worse version of the Chain Lance. So with that, the Stormcaller staff is 35 credits, the Chain Lance is 55, but the Stormcaller staff obviously allows the Call the Storm skill to be used. Chain Lance is -1 to hit when engaged, 2-inch long range for versatile, strength 2, AP -2, damage 2. So it's really good when you're mounted and doing drive-bys. It also adds +1 to strength when mounted because it's got the lance rule. Really good. I love that as a weapon. If you're having, unless you want the absolute beat stick of this champion and just ignoring the Call the Storm rule, suppose if you're playing in the Underhive, that's the one that you want to go on this because you won't be able to manipulate the weather. Yeah, the Stormcaller staff is a slightly worse version of that and allows you to do that skill. It's just auto-include for me. How would I kit out this? How would I kit out this champion? So the two ways, Stormcaller staff, and I would say either a scavenged autogun or long rifle. And that's because if he's standing at the back immediately manipulating the weather, it's going to be turn 2, 3, maybe even 4 before he starts moving. By which point, I know he's got the movement 8, but he's going to be quite far back and things are already going to be happening. So I want immediate ability to get into the battle. So if he's going to be manipulating the weather, long range weapon, I would recommend, which puts it down to long rifle if you've got the creds, or if you've not got the creds, scavenged autogun for 10 points. And just save it till later until you can afford the long rifle. With that, I would do designate target as my skill as well, because he can then designate a target from the back. Yeah, just help everyone out as a buff sort of character. If you wanted to go the combat sort of character, it's not too much of a downside that you don't have access to ferocity for Nerves of Steel. Because he's mounted, whenever he's hit, he can just take an initiative check, and he's got a 3-up initiative to stay stood up. So with that, that makes him able to do combat stuff. With that, I'd give him a Chain Lance for 55 credits, just as the best weapon. And then he can start doing group activations with your Helamite Riders, doing drive-bys at 2 inches. So then on to the Dust Rider, Tarnoki is his Fremen name, or their Fremen name. 80 credits, and that's pretty good, I'd say, really cheap. They come with a Helamite, and a mounted condition for any other gang is 50 credits. So really, it's 30 credits. But then you start thinking, well, he's already got a respirator, and a respirator's 15 credits. So that's 15 credits for the fighter. And then he's got a Sky Mantle, and we don't know how much that costs, but it grants that Hide in the Waste skill. So skills are valued at about 20 credits. So that's now -5 credits. So really, you pay -5 credits for the Ganger, and then his equipment is 85 credits worth of equipment. They've got the Tools of the Trade, multiple fighter cards are allowed. prospect promotion to a Stormcaller or champion. Born in the saddle, hot-headed and fast learner. None of those are massively surprising. Movement 5, but he's movement 8 really, because they cannot get off the Helamites because they're born in the saddle. Weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4, so very good for a prospect, the Ganger level of stats. Strength, toughness 3, 1 wound, initiative 3, 2 attacks. Leadership 9, cool 7, will 8, intelligence 9. So the combat skills are very good, or the combat statistics are very good. 2 attacks is really good on a prospect level or Ganger, especially coming with that mounted condition. The leadership, cool, will, intelligence are middling or slightly low, I would say, but they sort of Juve level, which they're prospects, so to be expected. Now, in this skill access, they have agility secondary, cunning primary, ferocity secondary, and they don't have access to the Wasteland skills at all, so they actually need to become champions before they get access to the Wasteland skills. Ferocity, about half of those skills are very good, so he's potentially worth rolling on. Nerves of Steel is dubious use to you because you're already in initiative 3 with a mount. Cunning, allowing infiltrate, which will then allow you to charge, and you infiltrate 8 inches away from enemies, and you've got a movement of 8. So that is really good for some first turn ganks. Dustback Nomads and equipment list. Blast rifle, blast carbine, scavenged auto gun. Would I take them on these guys? No. Pistols? No. Special weapons? Long rifle for the coolness. Web gun, because web guns are always good. Especially moving with a Helamite. Shooting, so move 8, web gun, and then someone else charges off a Helamite. And you can set that up and it's just an auto taking them out. Or if you fail your web gun, you've then got the charge coming up. It's just such a good combo because it's a web gun. What would I put on these guys? Chain Lances, every time I could. The versatile on the Chain Lance allows you to do drive-bys on people where they can't strike back. It's got +3 strength as you're driving by someone because it's lance, so you get +1 strength while mounted. 2 damage just ensures so much damage dice are going to be rolled. The other options, long blade. I like the long blade for the +1 to hit, but here is where your chain lances are really going to come into their own. And I think it's worthwhile outfitting these guys with chain lances. So that's 135 creds each, which means you can get 3 of them into your 400 credits as a Ash Waste player by only sacrificing 5 credits from the starting 1,000. So that's in the Ash Waste campaign, you get an extra 400 credits to spend on mounted, and you can top that up with your starting credits from 1,000. So it's 405 to take 3 with chain lances. So, on to Ash Waste Nomads Town Runny Warrior, which is the Ganger for 60 credits. So they've got the Wasteland Snipers special rule. So long rifles are treated as basic instead of special weapons. This is where I would put long rifles. They've got cunning and agility as their primary skill access. One can obviously be a specialist as normal. They've got movement 6, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4, strength toughness 3, wounds 1, initiative 3, 1 attack, leadership 7, cool 6, will 7, intelligence 8. So the cool is a fairly cool statistic. You've not got the 2 attacks that the Helamite Rider has, and it's only 20 credits to go for a Helamite Rider if you want to go combat. So I don't see why you would ever take these guys if you wanted to go combat, really. Yeah, I'd go long rifles on these guys. This is where I'd start including my rocket packs. I'd have one on a Chargecaster champion, but a rocket pack allows you to ignore the first ammo roll for a Chargecaster for yourself or a model in 3 inches. So if you pair up a long rifle Ganger with a rocket pack and a champion with a Chargecaster rocket pack, it means you can ignore the first 2 ammo rolls for only 10 credits. It's such a good combination. Again, they've got their limited weapons access, limited war gear and stuff. Again, they've got the respirator access. But what would I put on these guys? Specialists, I would put Chargecaster or Webgun. It's becoming slightly monotonous. Whenever there's Webguns in a list, it's just how many go in before I hate myself and my opponents hate me. And I try and limit it to 1 web per gang if I was playing, like if I'm playing friendly, 1 web weapon per gang, because they're just so nasty. Chargecaster is getting expensive. I tend to end up just designating a specialist and taking a normal weapon with them. And then you can expand into you can expand into melter guns later in the campaign. Yeah, you need to designate that 1 specialist, even if you're going to equip them with a normal weapon. Normal weapons, blast carbine versus blast rifle. The blast rifle, 15 credits versus the 25 of the blast carbine. The blast carbine gets a rapid fire dice and is got a better close range statistic. I would go blast carbine all the time. As I said before, if you're going cheap, I would go cheap and go scavenged autogun. Again, the scavenged autogun's got a rapid fire dice. It's got the same close range modifier. And if I want a long range modifier, which a lot of the time in the waste you will want to, because visibility always sets it to your long range modifier, I'd go long rifle for +1 to hit long range. If there's no visibility conditions, I've got a gang of snipers, which is really good. So there's just no downside so long as you have the credits to getting loads of long rifles for all the fluff. And yet, Chargecaster, as I said, is a bit expensive, but you can potentially get your specialist onto the Chargecaster as soon as you got the credits for it. So the Ash Waste Nomads Runtani Dust Runner, the Juve, 35 credits. Now, what do I see these guys as doing? Not a hell of a lot. They've got an average Juve profile of movement 6, so they know faster than an average ganger, but 6 is quite normal for a Juve. Weapon skill, ballistic skill 5, strength toughness 3, wounds 1, initiative 3, 1 attack, leadership 9, cool 7, so slightly cooler than the average Juve. Will 8, intelligence 9. And they've got the promotion specialist. So they've got cunning as their primary, ferocity secondary, agility secondary. Now, there's not actually a great loadout I would recommend here other than 2 scavenged stub guns. Or a scavenged auto gun, because that's the same credits. But the scavenged stub gun gets +2 to hit at short range. So he's at auto 2 shots and 2 chances to hit, rather than the auto gun's 1. I think the blast rifle and blast carbine are just too expensive. Unless you're getting up there or getting close to, you don't want to do it if you're leveling up into a champion. I just find it hard to recommend any of that. Close combat weapons, long blade, stalking knife, both really expensive, especially on a Juve. On Juves, I tend to want to just put sort of a 10 credit thing, at most 15. Any more than that, stats aren't worth it. I might as well upgrade to a ganger. A ganger with a worse weapon that's hitting on a 4 with a good modifier will probably end up better than a Juve with a bad one. And it really pains me to say it, because I love Juves, but I think this one in particular I'm not a massive fan of for the damage output. If you are playing with Juves, you really want one, I would go, if you get them free from your tactics card, which they do get, blast carbines. If you are going with just outfitting one, I'd go scavenge stub gun, 2 of them, and I'd just run round stomping on people's heads, as I said, after the champion with web gun has webbed them. And I'd just rack up a load of experience and make the champion with the stats you want from this Juve. And I found it a really good tactic with my Juves. They don't need to be brilliant stat lines, they just need to be quite cheap. I find the best I don't want anyone to get shot, is my thinking. I don't want to use screens, because they sort of, in my head, well, everyone knows everyone. It's probably the brother or sister of someone in the gang. they don't want them to get shot. So they just played like a normal Ganga rather than as a meat shield. 40 credits for a meat shield is potentially too expensive. There's actually a better option that we'll come up to next, or in a second, if you want a meat shield. And yeah, I would recommend running around stamping on people's heads after you've webbed them with this Juve. Next, we will go into the brutes and hangers-on. So as a hanger-on in Ash Waste Nomads, you can take ammo jacks, rogue docks, and what's the third one? What is the third one? So and sloppers. Now the only one that I'd actually recommend there is the rogue dock, just to keep your fighters alive. The slopper and ammo jack I just don't find have a good enough chance to actually get their ability to go off to make them worth it. I know the ammo jacks can be slightly good in combat, but I prefer to spend my hangers on as like gang buffs rather than another combat fighter. The Ash Waste Nomads special hanger on is 0-2 Helamite Herders for 40 credits each. I'm not going to go over all their stats, but what they actually do. So if your Dunescuttler is critically injured, it can go into recovery instead. Otherwise, on a D6, on a 3+, the Dunescuttler heals any lasting injuries it has and goes into recovery. So if you get a few lasting injuries on your Dunescuttler, this can heal those injuries so long as you don't mind missing a game with it, which is just incredibly good. It ignores a massive downside of brutes. If you don't choose to do that in the post-game sequence, you can attempt to train the Dunescuttler, make an intelligence test on his intelligence of 7, and it earns D3 XP. It can't be performed in the same post-battle as the last skill. And he's got average equipment and skill. That's not what you're buying this guy. You're buying this guy so that you can keep your Dunescuttler alive. And he does it really well. And if he's not doing that, he's racking up XP, which is always worth it. If you've got a Dunescuttler, next time you've got 40 credits, I would recommend getting a herder. And that is all that needs to be said on there, I think. Brutes, 0-2 Dunescuttlers. So the same 0-2 as the herders. 210 credits, and oh my god, what a brute. So he's movement 6, weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 5, strength toughness 5, wounds 3, initiative 3, 4 attacks, leadership 7, cool 8, will 8, intelligence 8. And they're fairly solid stats. Weapon skill 3+ is solid, movement 6 is very good for a brute. But we've not got to the best bit. So the Dunescuttler is armed with mandibles and equipped with heavy carapace armour. Now mandibles are, I believe, -1 to their opponent's armour save. Yep, it does 2 damage. So your 4 attacks are each doing 2 damage. And a rending, so on a 6 to wound, will do an additional damage. So 3 damage with your 4 attacks if you get those 6s. But we've still not got to the best bit. So the brute is also equipped with heavy carapace armour. So you are only charging 5 plus D3, but you've got a 3 up to the front and a 4 up to the side, which is better than any brute that there is out there. Even better than the Exo Driller that's on the next page, which only has light carapace armour. So he's actually the most heavily armed brute, or armoured brute, that there is. But we've still not got to the best bit. Wall Scuttler. The vertical distance is not halved when going up walls. Always counted climbing up and down the ladder. That's the best bit. No, that is not. That's a very nice addition to the Dunescuttler. But this one is the best bit. Hard to kill. Rolling on lasting injuries. Roll twice and apply whichever result the controlling player wishes. Now that's an incredible skill for keeping your brute alive. And it sort of steps on the toes of the herder, but it just means that no real bad damage is going to be done to your Dunescuttler. Because you don't roll it and re-roll and keep the second roll. You roll twice and choose. So, oh no, my Dunescuttler has lost an eye. It's got ballistic skill 6 now. But that's still not the best bit, I lied to you. The Dunescuttler has fearsome and nerves of steel skill. It's got nerves of steel skill. built in, which means the bane of Ambots has been solved in this Dunescuttler. Oh my god, starting a brute with Nerves of Steel. So the hardest bit of brutes I find is getting them into combat, other than getting pinned. Until you've got that first level up and bought Nerves of Steel, it's very hard to do the mass damage you want to be doing with a brute. However, starting with Nerves of Steel means they're immediately useful. And I do think this is the leveler the Ash Waste Nomads have with gangs that can take vehicles. Because it's high movement, so it's charging quite far, it's not getting pinned, so it's just an absolutely incredible brute, and I would recommend starting with this brute if you can, because it is immediately useful. Really, enough cannot be said about how good that brute is. Like, it's 210 credits. The Exo Driller on the next page, which I was middling about, is 250 credits. The Ambot, and I will look this up now, the Ambot. So an Ambot is 215, so he's actually 5 credits more expensive. And I know the Ambot has the melter guns, but the Nerves of Steel, like Carapace, is just so good. And even if something takes out your Dunescuttler, you're rolling twice and choosing the result. And even if you get 2 critically injured, you've got a herder that can remove... Sorry, even if you get 2 lasting injuries, you've got a herder that can remove those lasting injuries. It's just incredibly good. And as I say, you should start with one. So on to the Outland Beastmaster, of which you can have 0 to 2, available to any gang for 100 credits. The Beastmaster is movement 6, weapon skill, ballistic skill 4, strength toughness 3, 2 wounds, initiative 3, 1 attack, leadership 7, cool 6, will 7, intelligence 8. They've got a sawn-off shotgun with solid and scatter, mesh armour, and they have their beasts. So you hire these in addition. You've got the Wasteland Giant Rat for 30, Miliosaur for 60, and Ripperjack for 70. And we'll go through them separately, but I like the Giant Rat and Miliosaur really. Beast Trainer, the beast must remain within 6 rather than 3, and that's probably because you can have up to 3 of them, which would make it very hard to control. Now they can leave that range, but then they will have to take a cool check or break and return to the handler at the end of their activation. So you can charge out of it and use that to automatically break and run back to your handler, because they automatically rally when they get back to the handler. One with the beast, he can only have one type of beast. Skills, he comes with the fearsome skill, which is very useful. And then his type of critter that he has gives him another one. Miliosaur's gaining infiltrate, which is potentially the best one. Dodge is good on rats, and Catfall is good for how you will want to be playing Ripperjacks if you take Ripperjacks. He's got Ferocity Primary as his skill and Agility, so he can go either Nerves of Steel or Spring Up, which is you wouldn't want both, I don't think. Either of those are very good, Agility and Ferocity. So what do the beasts do? So the beasts, Wasteland Giant Rat, 30 credits. Now, this is my personal favourite, and not because it's the best one, but because they are so disposable. They've got movement 5, weapon skill 4, strength toughness 3, 1 wound, initiative 3, 1 attack. And actually fairly decent intelligence stats. They've got leadership 8, cool 7, will 8, intelligence 7. Can rats use terminals better than a lot of Juves? So they have the expendable rule, and this is the key. If a rat should ever die, friendly fighters within 3 inch do not have to take a nerve check. They are expendable though. Never more than 1 meter from a rat. So if your rat should ever be removed from your roster, like die for real, you actually just get another rat. So these can be herded in front of your gang, blocking corridors, and actually letting your opponent also have a great time by just killing rats. They are just immediately replaced. So I wouldn't ever be looking to level up these guys. They just throw them in front of things, whatever, there's some rats. Don't come down this corridor for at least 3 charges worth of activations. And yeah, just tie up your opponent with hordes of rats. I love the idea. I really do. So then, Millisaurs. This is potentially the best one damage-wise, or is the best one damage-wise. 60 credits, got movement 6, weapon skill 4, strength toughness 3, 2 wounds, initiative 4, 2 attacks. And also fairly solid stats, cool 7. So again, you can probably go outside that 6 inches. They're burrowing, so may move freely under impassable terrain if you've got movement to do so, but may not end its movement. So you can go underneath Zomatalis walls. So you can charge underneath Zomatalis walls, which is incredible. They've got the infiltrate skill, and they give that to your Beastmaster as well. It's just so good. They've got an armor save of 5+, and also around with a Fanged Maw. And the Fanged Maw gives Toxin to their attacks. So they've got 2 attacks, 3 on the charge, with Toxin for 60 credits, and can charge through walls. So good. So good. And there'll be such a horrendous thing to just put down on the table, just looks-wise. Can't say good enough about them. Combat primary skill. I didn't go through the rats because they're just going to die. Combat is their primary skill for the Millisaur. And yeah, they're just really good. Ripperjacks, 70 credits. Their movement 7, weapon skill 4, strength toughness 3, 2 wounds, initiative 3, 2 attacks, and cool 7, which is the main one from a Ripperjack. Flight, they can move freely between levels and never fall. They ignore impassable terrain, though may not end its movement with its base overlap. Oh, it may not ignore impassable terrain, which is weird. And may not end its movement with its base overlapping an obstacle. Yeah, I think that's weird. What if it's an impassable, like, drop? What if it's an impassable chasm? Or something like that. Why can they not fly through there? So weird. But anyway, so you're going to be wanting to use these to fly up and down levels in a multi-level Zomatalis or Sector Mechanicus. That's where this beast is really going to come into its own. Because Millisaur is built for Zomatalis. These are built for flying up and down levels. Flying up and down cliffs in the Ash Waste. Flying up and down buildings in the Ash Wastes. They're really useful based on their speed. But I don't think they're the best actual things at attacking. They're solitary hunters, so never gain assists or grant assists to other fighters. An enemy fighter engaged by Ripperjack suffers -2 to any initiative checks to make a retreat action, and any reaction attacks against a Ripperjack suffer an additional -1 to hit. Now, I don't think the -1 to hit, these want to be picking on Juves and Gangers, which are going down to a 5+ and a 6+ to hit in combat. Trying to pick on a champion, which is just going to punch you at 4 up to hit anyway, I don't think is going to work. So these need to pick on the isolated characters, and it's quite expensive to be doing that with. For 3 of them, it's 210 credits. For 170, it's just so expensive to be doing what they're doing. They've not got an armor save like the Millisaur has. And I think the Millisaur is just the better option most of the time. If you're playing on loads of Sector Mechanicus, these become much more attractive because of that moving up and down levels, being able to run away from things. It's a shame they don't have Rake Away like the Cawdor Sheen birds, but I suppose they get -2 initiative checks, making retreat actions for enemies, because they are face huggers, right? We all know where they came from. And yeah, Ferocity primary, so if you get these leveled up, they can get Nerves of Steel, so can always charge. That's good, but really charging from other side of a Zomatalis wall, I think is much better. So that's the Beastmaster. Giant rats, I love them. And I will go on to 3 lists for you guys that I'm going to be reading off my phone. And I wanted to do a bit of variation to these. So we've got this standard sort of long rifle start, which is a chieftain with stubgun, long rifle, and long blade. I've got a watcher with charge caster and suspensor, a watcher with long rifle, a specialist with web gun, and the web gun goes there because really it ignores his worst ballistic skill to put the web gun on the warrior, and then 2 warriors with long rifle. Super simple way to get into it. No extra things required other than the web gun from the starting box. So I think that's a really easy way to start the starting box. I suppose you might need to put on some longer barrels with some plasticard onto the warriors, but it's fairly simple. It's 6. It leaves you expansion room from within the box to actually expand that gang, as well as just being fairly simple to play and get your head around the Ash Waste Nomads and their special stuff. Next is one that we've not actually got a model for at the moment, which is the Dunescuttler. So we've got a chieftain with stub gun and long blade, a watcher with charge caster and suspenser. And I'm not really going over skills with these guys because whatever you pick, what we've gone through before, all will work. Their Wasteland skills will work. Watchers' shooting skills are all good. The leader has multiple options. Like leadership is a really good skill set. He's just pick and mix. They are all really good. So it's a chieftain with stub gun long blade, watcher with a charge caster suspenser, the Stormcaller with a Stormcaller staff, then got a warrior with a scavenged autogun, 2 dust runners with scavenged auto guns, just to add a bit more firepower. Like, I know I said I didn't massively rate them during the section, but it just allows you to pin some people. And this is how, like, it comes into it when writing actual lists doesn't always marry up exactly with what's the best or what your feelings are when viewed in isolation. These multiple rubber hits the road moments in writing lists and playing and looking at lists, and this is one of them. So yeah, 2 dust runners with scavenged autogun, and then the Dunescuttler, and that takes to 1,000 credits. If I was playing in the Wastes proper, I'm only giving the 1,000 credit list here. I'd drop an autogun on the scavenged dust runner, 2 being a stub pistol, and then I would take 3 Helamite Riders. Same with the long rifle. I'd drop one of the long rifles to a blast carbine and take 3 Helamite Dust Riders again. Finally, I've got these Call the Storm list, which I've just planned out 1,400 credits for the Ash Waste. And this one's going to be quite I'd say a spammy list, but it's the only way to get your entire gang mounted currently, or entire gang. So we've got the chieftain, who's got a long rifle, who's just going to be hiding out in the wastes. He actually can't take a Helamite. He could take the sprinting. He could change the long rifle to change the long rifle to a long blade. That's what it's called, and also take like a scavenged stub gun and take the Wasteland Walker to get +2 movement, and he's going to be sprinting as fast as those mounted characters are anyway. So that's what I'd sort of do if you wanted to have it like all mounted. I'd model him with that and just say he's just got +2 movement. I've got 3 Stormcallers. Now, I was going to do 2 with Lances and 1 with Stormcaller staff, and the points just worked out that all 3 could have Stormcaller staffs plus 2 of them with Lances. So that means in the Wastes, you group activate on first turn with 1 of them, and 2 of them both do the Call the Wastes thing and just change the visibility by 12. The third one then changes the visibility by 6, and now it's combat time. So then, after that, you've got 5 identical Dust Riders, all with Chain Lances. That is going to do some damage, I would say. You've got 8 characters, all with Helamites. 1 of them has a Stormcaller staff, but no Chain Lance. The rest have Chain Lances. They've all got 2 attacks. They're all hitting on at least a 4+, because the prospects of weapons go 4. And I think it's going to be a really scary gang because you can just motor across the board at 16 inches a turn when you double moving, or even sprinting with your leaders 16 inches a turn if you go the Wasteland Walker. And I think that's just terrifying because you can just pick on people. Close in massively the ash clouds and just go to town taking them apart. But yeah, that is my 3 list. That is my Ash Waste coverage. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Tell me any tricks that I missed below. If you did like the video, you want to see more of them, let me know by liking the video and subscribing. The analytics let me know you like this sort of content. And there is also a Patreon link below where you can get one of the dice trays that we've been using recently on the channel, as well as access to the Discord in which we're talking about the upcoming campaign for Necromunda that I'm going to be running. I will be doing videos on that, but we're currently going through the initial stages of the campaign now. And yeah, I will catch you guys next time in a bit.